So everybody wanted me to ask you this question.
Yeah.
So just our community. What's one of the most interesting celebs you've become great friends with?
So the most interesting,
Just the most interesting. Like you would never think. Like just they're just like.
I can tell some people you would never think I'm friends with. Like so I'm gonna say a couple of them. Jeremy Piven, Pauly Shore, and Dan Bilzerian are some of the most very interesting. Okay. Pauly is so.
I've heard that name.
Pauly Shore is he was in Encino Man. He was a famous. He was on MTV back in the '90s.
Yeah. Okay.
I go out. I will go out in Las Vegas and I'll hang out with Pauly and I'll introduce him to girls. And it's kind of weird because they don't realize this is one of the most famous people in the world back in 1995. They don't get it. Jeremy Piven, it's really interesting because he's the star of Entourage. He played Ari Gold in Entourage. Okay. Yeah. And I'll hang out with Jeremy. I'll go to shows with him. He'll do comedy shows or whatever. Sure. And we'll hang out every once in a while. But Bilzerian is. Honestly, it's really hard to top him. He's one of the most interesting people in the entire world.
What's he like? I don't know much about him.
Dan is God. How do I even explain this? Externally, he solved Instagram before anyone. He got to 30 million followers on Instagram as a man.
What caused him to kind of do what he's doing?
When the app was going through its organic growth period, he was posting the most lascivious, insane photos of him wakeboarding and then behind him were 6 topless girls holding the boobs. He was
of course.
So even beyond everyone else.
Before that, what did he do before that to be now I'm going to be with a bunch of women?
Yeah, so Dan was he went to University of Florida and then he became a professional poker player. But here's what he did. So a lot of people don't believe he made the money from poker. He did. Okay. What happened was, Dan, just imagine if you could go to the YMCA and play basketball for money, but you were playing against third graders.
Okay.
And who think they could beat you.
Okay.
Imagine you were playing against 80-year-old people.
So he was that high level poker.
No. He'll admit he wasn't the greatest poker player.
Okay.
What he would do is he would set up parties and houses where people would want to it was almost an honor to lose money to Dan. Does that make sense? Dan would have the most fun poker games.
I watched a movie about that. Some lady.
Molly's Game.
Yeah.
He was in
He's
one
kind
of those
like
games.
that.
Yes.
Okay.
So he would create situations with Sam McGee or Alec Gores. He's a SPAC king or whatever. Yeah. Alec Gores lost $40 million to Dan in poker games.
Oh my gosh.
So the way that would, by the way, Alec Gores admits he lost $40 million to Dan. For anybody who thinks that this didn't happen. So what happens is Dan would set up these games with whales who weren't as good as they thought they were. And Dan, let's just say Dan was an 8 out of 10 out of poker. Yeah. But Doug Polk is a 10 or Moneymaker. These guys are a 10 out of 10. Dan's an 8 or maybe even 7 out of 10.
But he was playing threes.
But he's playing threes.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
People don't understand. And the reason why this makes poker players so mad is because they're fuck, I could have done that.
Yeah.
But what Dan does is when at the poker game, it's there's a hot girl giving you a massage. It's in a cool house.
You're not going to be as pissed.
Because you're losing to Dan and you love Dan. Dan, that's what he did. And he did this, and then he started staking other people. So there's casinos in Macau where white people can't play.
Oh, okay.
And so Dan will start staking some Asian poker players to go play there, and then they'd come back and give him the money. He staked one guy, Jay Farber, a buddy I know. He staked him. I can't remember how much he gave him, but Jay won $5 million. He got second place at the World Series of Poker, and then Dan got $1 million out of that.
Really?
So it was stuff like that Dan would do for a while, and that's how he made a bunch of money. And then he started getting paid because he was such a celebrity online. But to explain, I'm trying to explain this thing with Dan. I don't even know how to explain. He's incredibly generous and super fucking smart, but he's not as ostentatious as you would think he is on his social media.
What's his plan? Where does he want to go?
He wants to be a billionaire. He told me the other day. He said one time in an interview, and I thought it was really interesting. He goes, if I get to a point where I'm a billionaire and dopamine just doesn't hit the same way or something to that extent, he goes, I'm going to shave my beard and I'm going to go start stocking shelves at a Walmart just to reset my dopamine and have nobody recognize me and just go back to a normal life. He's so famous that we can't even go to a CVS.
Yeah.
Do you understand? It's that.
Somebody's who is it?
Well, he's got security with him everywhere we go.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
And so. I'm not gonna lie. He's definitely the most interesting. There's some females that I'm friends with that are super interesting.
Yeah.
But he's definitely that would probably be one of the most interesting.
The most interesting cat. So let's talk about last question.